In just a moment, we'll get started. We know everybody is taking it easy, hopefully, because of this. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's staying warm, healthy, and well as we are getting through this little storm, or big storm, whatever you want to make it. Just a few commercial announcements. As we say, tomorrow night we begin our Journey of the Soul class. That can be done on Zoom or in person. Hopefully everything will be cleaned already by tomorrow and be able to even do it in person. But otherwise, we also have it in Zoom. Information will be sent out later on today. And that is for the first class of Journey of the Soul. Again, that starts tomorrow, a 6 weeks course at 7:30 p.m. You can visit at jewishli.com and you can see the Zoom information or request an email and the link, and I will send it to you. As we continue in our discussion of the Torah readings of the week, as we're now in the book of Exodus, last week we finished with the Jewish people crossing the sea and waging war against the Amalekites. Today, we are now, in this week's Torah reading, we read about as the Jewish people receive the Torah. The Ten Commandments that the Jewish people receive, a mental event in Jewish history or in the world history. This is what made the Jewish people a nation. This is what gave us our mission statement and gives us the ability to connect and to fuse finite and infinite. But something very interesting, if you look in the Torah, concerning this week's Torah reading. While this week's Torah reading talks about the Ten Commandments and the giving of the Torah, the name of the Torah reading mentions nothing of it. The name of the Torah reading doesn't even give a clue to it. Not like even last week where they sang the song in the Torah, and even though the name is Beshalach, it's called Shabbos Shira, Shabbos Chazak, but there's no clue in the name of the Torah that you would ever know that the Torah was given in this week's Torah reading. Instead, the name of the Torah reading is called the Parsha of Yisro, Jethro. Now, who was Jethro? He was a very important person indeed by the very fact that he was the father-in-law of Moses. He came and joined the Jewish people by Mount Sinai. Some say after Mount Sinai, but it was at the Sinai desert, bringing back Moshe and his family. But what happened here? Why is it that the entire Torah reading is called Jethro, Yisro, and no mention of the giving of the Torah? What was so unique about this individual that the entire Torah reading, of which the Torah is given to the Jewish people, encapsulates and is all named by this person? The commentaries explain that if not for Yisro coming, the Torah wouldn't have been able to be given. What is so great about Yisro? What did he transform that automatically made it possible for the Torah to be given? So let's find out a little bit who this Yisro is. Yisro, going back to the beginning of the book of Exodus, was actually one of the advisors of Pharaoh. When Pharaoh had the Jewish problem, he consulted 3 individuals. One of them was Jethro. Jethro was opposed to any type of enslavement. He warned Pharaoh that any person who starts up with the Jews, just like Pharaoh before him started with Abraham and with Isaac, all those people did not have a good end. Therefore, there's nothing that they should not start up with the Jewish people. Because of that, he was exiled from the land of Egypt and ended up in the city in the country of Midian. Over there, he became a priest. And the Talmud tells us that Jethro was a person who served every type of idolatry. And not only did he serve every type of idolatry, but he moved up in the ranks that he became to the highest levels of every type of idolatry. And then he resented it. He gave it up. So all the people of any type of religion resented Jethro because he would make it to the top and drop it. So everybody resented him. We see this when Moses came to the city of Midian, and he was by the well getting water, and he sees the daughters of Jethro being harassed by the other shepherds. They were being harassed and they were excommunicated because since their father was a person who did not belong to any religion of the sort. With this, Jethro then, later, after he hears about the story of the Jewish people crossing the Red Sea, after he hears about the war of Amalek, Jethro says, those are the people I want to belong to. Now, you hear the story of the crossing of the sea. That's amazing. That's like an amazing feat. 3 million Jews cross the sea in 12 different canals, it becomes dry land, and the Egyptians are drowned, you can understand why a person would be amazed by it. But what's so wondrous about the story of Amalek? What did that have to change within him that all of a sudden he says, yes, I want to convert? And the story of Amalek takes us of an individual who was from the grandchildren of Esav. And over here, this child of Amalek, this nation of Amalek, was a regular country who was waging war against the Jewish people. Nothing changed. Even after the Jewish people have successfully left Egypt, the nations of the world were afraid of the Jews. But the enemies will always be enemies. Nothing changed. So what did change Jethro's mind? How did this convince Jethro? Well, when Jethro comes and joins the Jewish people, he says an interesting word. He tells the Jewish people, Ato Yadaiti, now I know that God is the greatest. Now I know is because Jethro tried out all other religions. And over here he came to the conclusion that only the God of the Jews is the correct one. When Jethro saw the experiences of the crossing of the sea, he said, yeah, that's an amazing miracle. But what does that have to do with me? That's fine. Let me believe in God. I'll believe in God while I'll stay in Midian. I'll believe in God while the Jews are great. But why do I have to join the Jewish nation? Let them go get the Torah, and I'll just the war of Amalek. And he realized that if you don't have a connection with Moses, if you don't have the connection with God, if you're not there basking in the glory of God, then what's going to happen? Eventually, you might succumb to the haters as well. Same idea. Jethro was telling the Jewish people, and why the entire Torah reading is named Jethro is to teach us that if a priest, a person who has tried out every other religion, can come to the conclusion and appreciate and understand the greatness of Judaism, every single Jew can make that necessary change. Every single Jew can realize, because what's the Torah about? The Torah is about transformation. The Torah is about making a difference. And who is the first person that showed that the Torah can and will make a difference in your life? Is Jethro. Jethro is a person who personified, I've tried it all, but there's nothing better than Torah. There's nothing better than God. Jethro is the person who personified the change that the Torah will affect in the world. And that's why the Torah reading of the giving of the Torah is mentioned in this week's Torah reading, named Jethro. I'd like to share with you a story I recently read about a great rabbi who I knew very well. His name was Rabbi Emanuel Shochet. He was very well known for his special speeches that he would give, especially on college campuses, in his very confronting way and a very humorous perspective. And he was very well known for having debated missionaries and Christians and so on and so forth on college campuses. And one time he was invited to speak at a college campus in Buffalo, New York. Upon hearing that most of the people in the audience were not going to be Jewish, he asked the Rebbe what he should talk about. And the Rebbe told him he should talk about the concept of charity, because that is applicable Jews and non-Jews alike. And he told him to share the story about the very famous miser in the city of Krakow. And so Rabbi Shochet comes to the place and he says his lecture, and he gives a lecture about the concept of charity, very well articulated, as he was a prolific speaker, though still with a little bit of an Hungarian accent, but unbelievable speech that he gave. And he spoke about the story of this miser that was there. And he tells them about the story in Krakow. There was a story who was known as the miser, who was known as Yassala the miser. He was a very wealthy individual and never contributed to any of the town's causes. When the time came for him to pass, the people of the burial society decided that we're going to take a little bit of revenge on this Yassala the miser, and we're just going to put him at the edge of the side of town, edge of the side of the cemetery, without any great fanfare, because he was not a person that at all participated in any of the town charities. They buried him. Weeks go by, and all of a sudden, many of the town's charities run out of cash. Everybody's wondering what's going on. And lo and behold, they find out that this town's miser was really a very. With that, the rabbi of the town, Rabbi Yomtov Lipman Heller, who was the great known Tosfos Yomtov, a commentator on the Mishnah, said, "I want to be buried next to this Yasala." And from then, his great name, his great burial place, which was at the edge of the cemetery, became the center and a very special place. Rabbi Shachat concluded his story, finished his speech, and at the end, a young priest approached him and asked him if he can say the story again to him. Rabbi Shachat thought maybe he didn't understand with his accent, so he repeated the story again. And the fellow said, "Do you mind saying the story a third time?" He said, "Well, if you didn't get my accent the second time, I doubt it you'll be able to understand it the third time." But he said it again. And after he said it the third time, the priest said, "One more time, but this time can I come to your room and you tell me the story in private?" Rabbi Shachat thought this guy's a little bit off the wall, but he came to him in his room and he tells him, "Let me tell you, that story you just said about Yasala the miser, I am a descendant of his. My mother left after the war and married my father, who was a general in the American Army. However, the only guarantee that she would marry, the only way that my father would marry her is if she would forget about her Judaism. And this way, I was brought up in a non-Jewish home. I went and became a priest. Before my mother passed away, she came to me and told me and said, I have to tell you something. Number one, I am Jewish." And then she went on to tell me the story that was a tradition in our family. The rabbi looks at him and he says, "You know, it means you're Jewish." He says, "I know." And that was the end of the conversation. Many years later, Rabbi Shachat's at the Kotel in Jerusalem, the Western Wall. And a Breslov chassid comes over to him with long payas, long hat and jacket and everything else and says, "Do you recognize me?" He says, "I don't." He says, "Well, I'm that priest from Buffalo, New York." We never know what inspires people to make a drastic change in their life. We never know what inspires people to awaken their inner soul that exists within them. But one thing we know for sure, that we are all able to change. And who teaches that? Who is the paradigm of the one that was able to make this drastic change and recognize when truth is truth? Was Jethro. Jethro, who experienced any type of religion, experienced all different types of religions and faiths, but was able to come to acknowledge and said, "Ato Yadaiti, now I know for sure I got the right one, that God is it, the Torah is it, and that Moses is it." Jethro, the paradigm of somebody recognizing that we can all change, we can all become better, that's only when the Torah was able to be given. Once we have that recognition that we can transform ourselves, that we can become better, then the Torah can be given, because the Torah is the recipe, gives us the ingredients and the tools to be able to become better people. Well, God bless you. Have a great day. And let us hope that as we study the words of the Torah, as we continue to study every single day these words of the Torah, we will become better people and change the world for good. God bless you. Have a great day. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.